was in that. I just couldn't understand. I was so angry with God. I had never, ever felt that way, ever in my life. And it was one night we were here in this building. I was standing literally like right over there, and we were singing a song. We had like a guest worship band, and they were singing a song called "Oh Taste and See," and basically the song just talks about how you know, there'll be joy in sadness. And I finally was able to say to God, okay, God, I know that these things are hard and tough for me, and I don't understand them, but I know that you're going to use these experiences for some reason. But I didn't know what it was yet. And a few months later, all of a sudden, I was in the medical field, and so I was all about, like, you know, all the medical stuff. And I was just like, I don't know, something like this, and I felt like a weird bump in my neck. And I was like, what's this? And so I work for doctors, and I said, can you just, like, look at this real quick? And she's like, well, you know, I don't know exactly what it is. I would just go to your doctor and get it checked out. And so I went to my doctor, and he's like, well, I'm going to send you for tests and blood work and all this kind of stuff. And so he sent me for all this stuff, and some things came back that were weird or whatever. And so he's like, well, I want you to go to this doctor. And so then that doctor was like, I want you to go to this doctor. And then that doctor was like, I want you to go to this doctor. And about 10 doctors later, no one knew what was wrong with me. And so it was months and months and months. So finally, I found myself having to have an operation to test if I had cancer. And so at this point, I'm like 20 years old, and I'm saying to God, okay, I thought you wanted to be a missionary. How could you give me cancer? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I realized that the experiences I had and that hurt with my aunts gave me such a peace about what I was going through. And I knew that God had a plan and a purpose for everything. And He literally, I don't know how, but He carried me through all of that. Months of not knowing what was going on, worrying that I had cancer at 20 years old, with a perfect peace. And I remember standing in front of Pastor Jimmy, and he was like, I don't understand. How are you fine? I'm like, I don't know. I just know that God has a plan, and I'm gonna see it through. And I knew that He needed to use me in ways that I didn't know, and that everything was gonna be okay. And thankfully, after 3 days of waiting for a call from my doctor to tell me if I had cancer or not, finally he called and said, there's no cancer, you're fine. And that was like the biggest relief of my life. But at the same time, I was just like, thank you, God. I know, because I knew that my story couldn't end, because I needed to do something more. I graduated college, and I thought that I was going to get a job as a nurse making lots of money. And God said, you're not going to make lots of money, and you're not going to get a job. And so I got really discouraged, and I said, well, how can I do anything in the medical field if I have no experience? And so I kept praying and praying and praying. And finally, God provided me a job out of Hurricane Sandy. And talk about God using bad things for good, because if Hurricane Sandy had never happened, I would have never gotten the job that I had. And so it was kind of like a miracle. And God put me exactly at the place that I needed to be able to say, okay, God, I'm ready to go on the mission field. Because I'm pretty sure that if I had gotten a good job in a hospital making lots of money, there would have been no way that I would have said, okay, God, I can go on the mission field now. But He didn't let that happen for me to say, okay, God, I'm ready to go on the mission field. And so I applied the day I graduated to be a missionary associate. And the way that it works in Assemblies of God missions is there's basically 3 levels of missionaries. There's MAPS, there's MAs, and then there's career missionaries. And so MAPS missionaries, you go for like 1 to 11 months. MAs is a 1 to 2 year commitment, and then career missionaries, that's your life. You're a missionary for life, basically. But in order to be a career missionary, you have to have like credentials with the AG and all that stuff, which I don't have. So I said, okay, I'm gonna be an MA. And so I applied to be an MA the day I graduated college, and thought that was a good idea. And then it turned out to, I just said, okay, never mind, I don't want to do this. I don't think I could do this. And so I kind of, again, was like running away from it. And God said to me, no, you have to do this. I'm not giving you a choice. And so in October of last year, I accepted to be a missionary associate with Healthcare Ministries, which is the ministry that I went on my first mission trip with when I was 13 years old, which is absolutely crazy that God knew what He was doing when I was 13, when I was a young teenager, that He put me at that time, at that missions trip, so that I would know about Healthcare Ministries, so that 11 years later, I would know to contact them to be a part of their ministry. And so I get the wonderful privilege of moving to Springfield, Missouri. Does anybody actually know where Springfield, Missouri is? Well, he does, because he lived there. So basically, Springfield is like sort of in the Midwest. It's like by Illinois, Arkansas, you know, all over there, fun stuff, nothing like Long Island. And so I get to go to Springfield, and I get to work for Healthcare Ministries full-time. And then what I get to do is we travel around the world setting up short-term health clinics in places where people don't have easy access to medical care. Nathaniel just got this whole row sick. So I get to go and I get to bring medical care to these people, and I get to not only do that, but I get to share the gospel with them. And I also get to, I am working on my master's in public health. It sounds fancy, but it's really not. I just learn how to go into communities and help them better their health. And so I'm doing that so that I can go into places around the world and go into communities and teach people how to be healthy after we leave with our clinics. And I get to teach them things like proper hygiene and how to take care of things like diabetes and stuff like that. And so that's what I get to do for 2 years. But there's one thing that goes along with all of this, and I spoke about how God had told me that I needed to surrender. But it's not just enough to surrender your life to God, because after you surrender, then it comes the real hard part, and that's the part of sacrifice. Now, I don't say these things because I want to sound like I'm really amazing because I'm going on the mission field, but I have to make some pretty crazy sacrifices in order to be a missionary. And although it's not like some people do when they go into the jungles of places and things like that, but for me it's a big deal. I mean, okay, so I have almost a brand new car that I have to get rid of. And I have have to take my sister's old 97 ugly green Nissan Altima. And it may not be a big deal to you, but that's a big deal to me. And I have to leave my family. My family